I'm Tom Morello, host of Maximum Firepower, a weekly podcast focusing on the music, the moments, and the movements that have shaped my worldview and left an indelible mark on me as an artist and activist.
Come correct with Maximum Firepower.
Redwood Forest, Gulf Stream waters.
This land was made for you and me.
This is Tom Morello's Maximum Firepower.
I'm Tom Morello, and this is Maximum Firepower. My esteemed guests today are Nina Gordon of Veruca Salt, longtime friend and musical compadre, and Anne Preven, the Oscar-nominated Anne Preven, fellow Harvard classmate of mine, though she's 30 years younger than I am, which is really weird, and great friend. Now, the overall arching topic for today's show is going to be open mic nights. We'll talk a little bit about our personal histories together, but there was a period in the early 2000s when a group of talented friends would gather sometimes multiple nights a week at various open mic nights in Los Angeles to ply our wares and to sharpen our songwriting abilities. And Anne and Nina were very much a part of that. And it was, for me, it was a hugely sort of formative part of my artistic life, and it bore some interesting fruit. So first of all, Anne and Nina, hello and welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
So Nina is a fellow Chicagoan, and your band, Veruca Salt, was one of my favorite bands of a particular era. I was in Atlanta attempting to record with Rage Against the Machine the Evil Empire record during the global ascension of Veruca Salt. And I was a huge fan of both your songs and your vibe. And the first question I ask you is, like, how did Chicago influence you as a songwriter and rocker?
Oh, I think just being in a Midwestern city where rock is one of the most important parts of your life. It's like food, friends, and rock and roll, you know. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, although as kids, I don't know if food was as important. But yeah, I feel like it also just being like cold and kind of dark. But we all had, you know, Cheap Trick in our blood, I think. You know, there was just that. Although I was more of an XRT than an LUP, Loop was like the big rock radio, and I was a little nerdier and a little more into Elvis Costello than like REO Speedwagon. But yeah, I feel like
you've reconciled that in later years, right? The REO Speedwagon and
sure.
Elvis Costello.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about it today. Like, I grew up kind of rejecting the stoner rock. So like Led Zeppelin didn't really like permeate my world until college. Because there was just something, it was like already claimed by the burnouts, you know, and I just didn't think of myself that way. And so it wasn't until like freshman year in college that my brother played, you know, Houses of the Holy for me. And, you know, it just like rocked my world and changed everything.
I mean, for me, the Chicago area, how it washed up, I lived in suburban. Did you live in the city or?
I did, yeah.
You were actually in the city, yeah. So I lived in the suburbs. I was about an hour north of the city in Libertyville. And there, again, it was like parking lot rock was, that was what music was. There was some sort of weird, we were trained to hate classical music and hate jazz music and hate whatever else. And it had to be big riff rock on the loop or nothing. But then also, and this relates to our open mic night stuff, I guess the way I describe it, like the suburban ennui, like the feeling that just something, the lawns are well manicured and everybody's got a smile on their face and the dads go to it, but something is darkly not right. You can't put your finger on it, but it's not right. And that is very much seeped into my DNA and came out when we began doing sort of our songwriting exercises on open mic nights. Now, Anne Preven I like to brag about a lot because she's a Harvard classmate of mine and an Oscar-nominated Harvard classmate of mine. But we didn't know each other when we were at Harvard.
No.
We first met at Cole Rehearsal Studios, which is the studio where the Rage Against the Machine Evil Empire record was recorded. And Anne and I were friends. We were rock friends in the hallways of Cole, right? And then one day, the proprietor who knew of my educational background said, "Did you know that Anne Preven went to Harvard as well?" I was like, "Anne Preven? Like from Edna Swap?" That was Anne's great band that she was in at the time. And I said, I did not know that. So then we connected over that. Now, Anne, while I was in Harvard, I was a spandex-wearing Metallian. Now, Anne belonged to a prestigious a cappella group and had a different experience. So how did your Harvard experience influence in any way your Oscar-nominated songwriting abilities?
Oh, God. I don't think it did.
I'm going to say it again and again.
I took one music class at Harvard and got my worst grade my whole career there in it. Like, I was an a cappella nerd. But I think, you know, a cappella teaches you a lot about arranging and about, you know, singing. I don't know. I don't think it was like a hugely formative time. I was pre-med. I wasn't thinking about a career in music at all. Yeah. I was pre-med.
I didn't remember that you were pre-med. So you were going to be a doctor, but you were
I
like
was gonna
basically
be a
in the
doctor.
pitches.
I did my thesis on like a part of the brain at a clinical research center at MIT. I used to commute to do my thesis. I had no thought about a music career at all, really.
And what was the name of the a cappella group? Because they always had these kind of...
The Opportunes.
The Opportunes. Yeah, the
And
Opportunes.
What was the name of the part of the brain that you did your...
The
that you did your
amygdala. Thank you
thesis
for
on?
asking.
Oh, okay.
The amygdalas might have been a better name for the group. The one thing about Ivy League groups is they tended to have the worst names. My band, Harvard band, that won the Ivy League Battle of the Bands, and I still have like the medal somewhere, was called Board of Education.
I love that name. That's a great name.
So good.
Come on.
I don't love that name, but
I
had the alternately black and leopard print spandex that I won that in against.
I remember the other band, the band that was popular at Harvard at that time was called 𝘓𝘂𝘓𝘂.
Oh, 𝘓𝘂𝘓𝘂. They were our bitter. They were our most bitter rivals. So later on at one of our Harvard reunions, and I will delicately not mention which one to preserve Anne's reputation in the industry.
Come on.
But we got to perform with the Boston Symphony Orchestra.
When he says we, he's being very generous. Because the truth is, they asked you to perform and you needed somebody to take some of the singing lines. And you were so generous in asking me. But I was thinking about it. I think between our Harvard reunion and me singing in front of all of our classmates and the class above us, whatever, I think the time before that I performed on stage was open mic night. Just to bring it all the way back.
Well, you blew the roof off of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. We did a cover of Ghost of Tom Joad with the Boston Symphony arrangement behind us, and you used all of your training from the amygdalas, or I forget whatever the name of the a cappella group. And it was pretty spectacular. Like Yo-Yo Ma is a Harvard dude as well. He's 10 years older than us. And so we're playing with the Boston Symphony, and and I'm shredding a guitar solo with my teeth. Cut to 10 minutes later, when Yo-Yo Ma has his chance, he began playing his cello with his teeth, and that was pretty a highlight of that. So around 2000, I was in a band called Audioslave, and it became clear to me my original intention was that Audioslave would be a more political band than my previous band, Rage Against the Machine. And when it became clear that in order for a band to find its moorings and to be the best band it can be, it has to be authentic. And the personal composition of Audioslave was just not going to be more political than Rage Against the Machine. So I had to find outlets beyond that. And I picked up the acoustic guitar, and this was in my late 30s, early 40s is when I first began writing songs as a singer-songwriter, influenced by the Springsteen record Ghost of Tom Joad and some Dylan records and whatnot, and wanted to ply my trade at local open mic nights. Now, it was difficult for me to do that because I went to one open mic night and I signed up as Tom Morello, and the 7 people there only wanted to hear Bulls on Parade. And that didn't work. So I came up with a moniker, the Night Watchman, as a cover, as a nom de plume to cover. And then I was kind of lonely doing it. So I asked some friends, like the two of you. And what I remember, it's some of the craziest, weirdest, and most wonderful musical experiences of my entire life were during those open mic nights. So a group of friends would gather, and I'd scour the LA Weekly for multiple open mic nights a week, where we would go down and sign up anonymously, wait in line to play 3 songs while there's a whirring latte machine in the background. And then afterwards, we would go out for drinks and sort of critique. It was like sort of a songwriter's workshop.
It was so much fun.
Sort of critique each other's work. And then each week, we were sort of challenged to come up with new material to then discuss. So, Nina, tell me what your memories are of this coven of songwriters in the early 2000s.
Well, I think we all chose pseudonyms or nom de plume. But what I remember is the challenges that we would give each other. Like, we'd come up with a theme for the song that you had to write. I don't know if it started out this way, but eventually we sort of morphed into this kind of challenge.
Theme
like
week,
someone came up with a theme. Yeah, you'd have a theme and you'd have to write that song and then perform it for everybody at this little, coffee shop in the valley. And the only one I can remember is the word shitstorm. I remember, I don't know, I think that was Dave Gibbs, Kid Lightning, who came up with that. And we all had to write songs. And I wished so badly that we all had recordings of our shitstorm songs. Does anyone remember what theirs was?
Well, I can tell you why shitstorm became a thing. We were finishing up like the first Audioslave record, and one of the suggested song titles for the album that I was trying very hard to veto was Shitstorm. So Shitstorm was in the front of my mind, and I was perhaps sort of working out some of my frustrations with that ongoing discussion.
Can you reveal who in the band was hoping for Shitstorm?
I believe that I jokingly brought it up, but I think it got a serious amount of momentum, particularly from our record producer, Rick Rubin, at the time, who was lobbying hard for the debut Audioslave record to be called Shitstorm. At the time, the band didn't even name. Maybe that was going to be the name of the band. But funny you should mention Shitstorm, because the person who won the Shitstorm sweepstakes was a fellow by the name of Dave Gibbs. Kid Lightning was his moniker. And the interesting thing about this night was, I went on to make 5 Americana albums that came directly from this. Anne went on to run Pulse Music and be nominated for an Oscar. Nina continues her excellent career as a songwriter. Kid Lightning made the Broadway musical Rock of Ages.
Yeah,
he was
that's
one of the creators of Rock of Ages. So we would run into people at these open mic nights. And let me tell you, an open mic is an open ass mic.
Oh,
and that
sure
just means anybody
You can
can sign
the
on
sweaty
up.
baby. You could get the sweaty baby.
We're going to talk about the sweaty baby. He gets his own. He gets his own chapter.
Baby.
He gets his own chapter. But within Dave Gibbs' song Shitstorm, he won the sweepstakes that week. In part because he referenced some of the craziness. There was this one band that sang a song called Megalodon that was just, you had to just try to keep a straight face because it was just so nuts. And then there was the badass Boogie Desire lady who was like sort of a hyper sexualized Janis Joplin, but without any of the vocal chops, but she was sure she had them, and her badass Boogie Desire. So I just would like for both of you and listeners, I've unearthed the lyrics to Kid Lightning Shitstorm, and I'd like to read them for you right now.
Amazing.
This was 2001, the Shitstorm Challenge winner. The song title Shitstorm by Kid Lightning. There's a shitstorm coming, baby. Better get out of the way. It might come tomorrow, or it might come today. Better get your house in order if it's in disarray. There's a shitstorm coming, baby, and it's heading your way. It's a half a tank of gasoline, a gallon jug of creatine. Girl, it wants to make your scene. Better shut all your windows and lock down the screens.
Wow.
It's a crack of thunder in the middle of the night. It's a 10-ton double dose of dynamite. You better watch your back when Kid Lightning strikes, because he's waiting for the moment to be just right. There's a shitstorm coming, baby. Better get out of the way. It might get here sometime next year or later on today. You better get your life in order if it's in disarray. There's a shitstorm coming, baby, and it's heading your way. It's hotter than a house on fire. It never sleeps because it's never tired. It's burning like a funeral pyre. It's bursting like a lover's badass boogie desire. Restless like a cherry bomb. It's creeping like a night-watching peeping Tom.
Ooh.
Could swallow you up like a megalodon. Little acorns keeps paging me. It won't be long. There's a shitstorm on the horizon. Better get out of the way. My antenna's buzzing. It'll probably touch down today. The cavalry's not coming. Things will not turn out okay. There's a shitstorm coming, baby, and it's heading your way.
Wow.
It's like Chaucer. It's like Chaucer.
It's so good.
And anyone hearing those lyrics, you might think just because of the refrain, there's a shitstorm coming, baby, or whatever it is, you might think that it was going to be like a metal song.
Heavens no.
But Dave Gibbs, he was the lead singer in a band called Gigolo Ants that were a great band in the 90s. And he has the sweetest, most beautiful voice. And I'm certain, although I can't remember the melody, I'm certain it was a very beautiful, heartfelt, gorgeous.
Like a baby bird singing. Like a baby bird singing. I'm Tom Morello, and this is Maximum Firepower. I'm here with my guests, Anne Preven and Nina Gordon. We're talking about open mic night and all it did for us and all it did to us. So there are a couple of specific instances at these open mic nights that I sometimes wake up in the night sweating and screaming. Yeah. And one of them, speaking of sweating, was the Big Sweaty Baby. Now, there was a club called the Coconut Teaser, which was at the corner of Sunset and Laurel Canyon. And in the basement, it was like a rock and roll club. But in the basement, it was like sort of an acoustic cafe, going for sort of a cafe wah, kind of village vibe down there with none of the attending talent. But on a Monday night, it was open mic night. And so we would take any open mic night you got. This is before we had kids or anything like that. We were ready to sing a song. And this place regularly featured a guy that we called the Big Sweaty Baby because he was a large kid and he brought his purple Marshall half stack to the open mic night. Now, he's a guy that had like sort of a heavy metal looking guitar, and he would plug in. though you could not define him as a guitar player. Like, imagine if you've seen people play guitar and you've seen people play like shredding solos and you move your hands in such a way that you've seen without any idea of what you're doing. It was this pure cacophony. But the look on his face, and when he began to sweat, was when he realized that the audience, the small audience, was actually hearing the sounds he was making. And it thrilled this baby. He was like a baby in a crib who was super happy, like with a rattle being rattled above his face. And he would sweat profusely, and his right hand would just jerk over the strings as the cacophony grew louder. I don't know if he was singing a song or not, but that was his open mic contribution, and I'm still haunted by it.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
You could really see people's trauma during their open mic night performances.
Absolutely.
Like, there were some haunting performances.
Yes.
And then I remember being at the cafe place that we used to go in the Valley, and I'd be in the middle of a song that was like sort of tender, and the smoothie machine would start up. It'd be like,
It's a long way to that Oscar, Anne. It's a long way to that.
I was like, you can't wait 3 seconds.
No, they could not wait. The short answer was they could not wait 30 minutes. And the host of that one was a very talented and very troubled character. He had some version of songwriter Tourette's, where he would sing like these beautiful, I don't know whether they were like sort of like deep cut David Bowie B-sides or whatever, or they were his own songs. But he had like he hosted the night. So he would play as often as he wanted. He'd play like between the different acts. And I believe that he had some grudge or vendetta against the woman who was making the lattes. And he would bark out in the most jarring, like sort of like Subway insane person way, like the most horrible misogynist epithets. I mean, there's no way the FCC will shut us down. But he would, he'd be singing a song about this is about the spaceman from Mars. I hate that star. We'd be like, oh my gosh. Like, is it? And he'd be waiting. It's like it was a tightrope because he'd be waiting for the next time when he would lower the Tourette's boom.
What I recall most is that there was an understanding that while we were sitting listening, waiting our turn to go up and perform, that we couldn't look at each other. I remember feeling, because especially in that little cafe, because it was so quiet, except when the smoothie machine was on, we were so afraid we would just crack up if we looked at each other.
That's correct.
And then we would make someone feel awful, which we didn't want to do. But we couldn't wait until it was over so that we could do the postmortem.
Right. So we would keep notes on on our both one another's performances, and we'd go through the whole night. So Big Sweaty Baby, he would get a whole lot of press inches.
But you know what's amazing? I remember getting such more detailed feedback on my silly open mic night performances than on any other part of my career performing, from your friend Jack and from all of you. Like you guys we would all take notes, and it felt like incredibly valuable feedback. You know what I mean?
Incredibly valuable.
Well, right. And because none of us there was no pressure at all. It was really just a way to express yourself and see what your friends think. And it wasn't precious. So it was very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember feeling like, because, when you drop in these open mic nights, sometimes it would be, like a comedian, like a dour comedian who would be reading from a pad, relating some past traumas that I was looking for the humor in it, just going like, this seems like just a horrible, lopsided therapy session that it's being inflicted on me rather than there being any potential entertainment value. But in our little group, it felt like we were creating an atmosphere where greatness was arising. Like, I remember hearing great Nina write great songs and Kid Lightning, and I would really I was in the midst of making Audioslave records, and then we would go on tour, and I continued this when I was out on tour with Audioslave. On nights off, I would go to open mic nights and sign up as the night watchman and play my 3 songs, anonymously in some cowboy bar, in Akron or somewhere, and continue it. And it really became addictive to me. And I remember spending we were in the midst of making an Audioslave record, but I was as much or more of my concentration and my artistic time was spent for the next Thursday night's open mic night. And for me, the biggest challenge was I had never been sung and played guitar at the same time, and I would forget the lyrics. So I'd write them like Eminem style, on my arm, There's always something going wrong in the mind. There's always some. Yeah. So, Anne, how did this songwriter salon, if in any way, sort of affect your songwriting and your career?
I think it made me never perform again until the Harvard thing.
Until you forced her up there.
Yeah.
No, it was, in my life and my career, it was a transitional time from being a performer to not being so much of a performer, which was a welcome transition, to be honest with you. Like, I'd been in a band, but I was sort of coming out of that and back into being just a songwriter for other people. So for me, it was just like a really fun way to kind of get out there and practice writing songs within, in a week by myself, which is what I did when I first started writing songs. And it was just so much fun. And then to get the feedback so quickly and, just make music with regular people watching you, play your song. It was just sort of very refreshing and very like, I don't know. I enjoyed it, and yet I never did it again.
That's fine. Nina, how about you?
Well, I think maybe I had made a solo record, and then I was getting ready to make another one. And so it was helpful, definitely, to play songs and figure out which ones were going to work and which ones were most interesting to you guys. And then I ended up making an album with some of those songs on it. And Tom came in and played guitar on one of them, and that was a huge honor. And then I got pregnant and became like a rock and roll housefrau. So that's basically what happened. Rock and roll housefrau is a good album title, you guys. I feel like I need to be like start a side project called like Hot Flash and be in a band and have an album called Rock and Roll Housefrau. This is Hot Flash with Rock and Roll Housefrau. And Hot Flash would have like an umlaut and then like
it certainly would. It certainly would.
Lightning bolt.
It absolutely would. Well, maybe it's time to return to some sort of Zoom version of the open mic nights. I mean, for me, the open mic nights were the beginning of a career. It was tapping into an artistic voice that I didn't know existed, and it tapped into that sort of like the stark, suburban, oppressive side. I originally thought that as a songwriter, it would be exclusively these kind of political screeds, and some of them were, but it felt like more of it was this kind of existential darkness that was very therapeutic in a way to write those songs. And, then I was so nervous performing on those open mic nights. I was very, very comfortable in an arena or at some big festival show, super comfortable, but in front of 6 friends, 3 guys, 3 other people, one with Tourette's and the latte maker in the background. It was terrifying and sort of naked and vulnerable. And I leaned into it and then, made a number of records doing that and still continue to write songs like that today.
I know. It's the best.
Any summations about open mic nights or that as we prepare to depart?
It makes me, I wonder if they still, they must still exist somewhere. It's such a great way to just watching people and how they relate to music, and just that people are so comfortable going up and just sucking and, being like horrifying. And I just, it's just so, horrifying. It's incredible about humans that they have so little self-knowledge and that they want to get up there and show their worst side.
When Louise, my bandmate, and I first started playing together in the early 90s, the very first thing we did was play open mics, the two of us with electric guitars and 2 little tiny amps. And I still remember those performers. Like, people just want to express themselves. And it's a beautiful thing. It's sort of, the same is kind of true of going to a karaoke bar, but it's even better when it's people performing, like really performing and making themselves so vulnerable. And it's very dear. Like, I think of that big sweaty baby and I just think, like, who is he? And he was, I'd forgotten about the guy you said was hosting the thing, that guy, and then whatever beef he had with the smoothie lady,
with the
like
barista.
That whole thing. I feel like that's just a fascinating character, whoever that guy is. And he was probably in like a metal band in the late 80s, and he probably like auditioned for Rat or something and didn't get the gig, and then hosting an open mic.
Well, we owe a great deal of thanks to him because his was the original open mic night that sort of began the salon that led to whatever
I think we stopped going because it got too popular. Is that what happened? We couldn't get on the list anymore.
That's right. You would have to wait. It would be a 3-hour wait to play. Yeah, that's when we started moving into the big sweaty baby territory at the other place.
Teaser, which was creepy and not great.
And I remember your mom would come. I remember one night at Coconut Teaser, and Mary Morello was there cheering you on. And,
always very supportive.
It was a big event.
Always very supportive. Thank you very much, Anne Preven. Thank you very much, Nina Gordon. This has been Tom Morello's Maximum Firepower. Been a great pleasure having you discussing our open mic night hijinks. Until next time, take it easy, but take it.
Let foes of justice tremble.
This has been Tom Morello's Maximum Firepower. Hear this episode again or listen to past shows right now on the SiriusXM app. Search Maximum Firepower.